However, there seems to me there's an elephant in the room, which you didn't mention in your presentation, and its name is China. I mean, China is economically bigger than all the other BRICS put together, and when you talk about trade, as you did, well, we don't need to bring cars to India, they already have cars and trains. The problem with trade within the BRICS is that studies show our economies are not complementary. And we don't have significant trade ties within the BRICS except for the ties of each country with China. So again, that in my view is the major challenge for South-South cooperation within the BRICS frameworks, and I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. Gerardo, thanks again for your insights, and I agree with basically everything you said. I only take issue with SDG 17 in your perspective there, that it could serve as a synthesis for the two paradigms that you described, Bandung and Buenos Aires. As it is now, it's neither of those. It's the DAC paradigm, pretty much. And I think even the specific examples of targets and indicators you brought in show how it adopts an approach of measurement and quantification of development cooperation that is pretty much against what our governments and ourselves have been arguing here, which relies by and large on monetization. So I'd also like to hear you about that. And actually, the issue of SDG 17 was also brought up by Stefan, and he also argued that it would be an opportunity for a new narrative. Again, we don't see it as it is now. We don't see any new narrative. We see, and not even a southern narrative. We see a northern narrative embedded in that SDG 17, I would argue. And finally, Pilani, thank you for bringing the conceptual challenges to the debate. I agree with you, and that's a concern that I have had for a long time. I'd just like to point out that unlike our Asian partners, in Brazil we do not count what our development bank gives in terms of export finance and other non-concessional notes. We don't count that in our mapping of international development cooperation. Even though, you know, our numbers are lower as a result. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Andrea. Thomas, please.
Many thanks for an excellent panel. I have two very specific points, one referring to the SDG 17 and the indicators. Also, Andre picked this up. Now, as we all sort of orient our politics towards the 2030 agenda, I think the SDGs are very relevant, and the statistical concept that comes with this, I think it's very important and binding for all member states of the UN. And Andre, the indicators were passed by the UN Statistical Commission, and there was a Brazilian, was the chair, the head of your statistical office. I mean, how can you say this is a northern and OECD-driven concept? I mean, all your governments agreed to it under Brazilian leadership. So what does that mean for the validity of the indicators, including the voluntary national reports that all the countries have to bring to the table now? I mean, that's a key issue. Let's be frank and straightforward on it. Second point, referring to the BRICS, the Indian presidency of the BRICS in 2016 started the process to bring the development cooperation agencies together. Sachin Chaturvedi was instrumental. I remember the pictures and the tweets from the meetings of the heads of the Development Cooperation Agency. It seems to me that China and South Africa lost that track. Is that correct? And if the information is correct, what does it mean for the BRICS work in this area, and what will the Brazilian presidency in 2019 do on that specific question?
You're really mean, Thomas. So I'm going to give 1 minute for each panelist to answer the questions before I give the floor to Sachin to close. Pilani, please.
Okay, cool. Concessionality and South-South cooperation. I think some of these, some of the loans that are coming from your development finance institutions, yes, you can include them as South-South cooperation. Where I want more precision is when we talk about development cooperation from the global South, right? That's where I'm calling at least for more precision. But sure, I mean, in the same way that that loans from the European Investment Bank, you can say, are part of North-South relations or North-South cooperation. You can absolutely count a certain, as South-South cooperation, in the same way that people include trade amongst countries of the South and so forth. So there I have no issue. But when we talk about development cooperation, I think we do need to be more precise, because there we are explicitly saying that it is about solidarity, it is about, not about purely, economic interests and so forth. So I think that's where we need to inject a little bit more precision, In terms of trilateral and triangular, I think, even if you look at the OECD, what they're doing currently is they're working on various typologies on trilateral cooperation. Or, because they just know that there is no common definition. Some countries include a country working with maybe a UN agency and even a private company. Some include South-South-South cooperation, and some do not include that. So there's a myriad of definitions there, and I think that's, there is an agreement that there is no common understanding on that. BRICS development agencies, good question, Thomas. We were having actually discussions with our respective agencies within government. We're actually having discussions also with the new development bank about actually putting together and following on from what the Indian colleagues had started. We wanted to do it before the BRICS summit, but that was not a possibility. So we're still not discounting it. We still are engaging, with our respective counterparts in South Africa. Hopefully we could do it, still this year. But with every day, the chances grow slimmer.
Thank you. I will urge you guys to be brief, please.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Just some brief responses. First on triangular cooperation, just one hint in this regard. I think there's one innovative aspect when it comes to SDG 17, that's multi-partnership approaches. And I would open up this kind of triangular cooperation definition, which we have right now, and rather apply this kind of multi-partnership approach, because this is probably the most important potential we have. Nevertheless, I would say SDG 17 as such is rather a very traditional one, ODA 0.7, blah, blah, blah. So my thinking would be next year we are going to have the main HLPF, including heads of state, in September in New York. And as you probably know, for SDG 17, in a formal sense, we have the Financing for Development conference every year, which is in a formal sense part of the HLPF. And I think this is the right place to think about innovations for SDG 17. One aspect in this regard could be, why not to include in the volunteer national reports, which is the main instrument in a way, reporting system, development cooperation aspects.